Now everyone's always mystified by how is it possible that the Aron took up space and at the same time didn't take up any space in Kodesh Kodashim. And the answer to that is that the Eibishter is nimnan noise, he could do the impossible. But the truth is, we're still left with a mystery. And the Mitteler Rebbe explains this concept that really it's just an expression of the Eibishter. The Eibishter is a kol yachol, he could do anything. And the same way he's found in the infinite, he's also found in the finite. Now this doesn't describe what the Eibishter is, but we say that inside Atzmos there's an inyan of chesed and gvura. Or in other words, l'mayla mayla den kates, which would be gvura, in the finite and the limited, and l'mata mata den tachlis, in chesed, in the infinite. Now, obviously, the Eibishter is much higher than all of these levels, but we still say that these levels are found inside the Eibishter. Now, this will automatically explain the natural state of things, so to speak, of how the Eibishter would express himself inside the Kodesh Kodashim. At the same time that the Aron took up space, it didn't take up space. Because by the Eibishter, it's not a problem that these two things coexist at the same time. It's how he expresses himself. And just by the way, he expects the same thing from the Yidden. The Eibishter gives a piece of himself to the Yidden, and he wants that Yidden should also express themselves to have joy and pain in the heart at the same time, and he wants from us the same concept that we should be nimnanim noise. So we have that capability. Now, we say by Makas B'Choirois, it had to take place at midnight. Different than all the other Makas that took place during the day, because at the same time that the Yidden were being saved, the Goyim had to be punished. And this is very different from how the other Makas were taking place. The other Makas, the Goyim received punishment from Midas Hadin, Shem Elikim, and then eventually the Makas stopped through Shem Havaya, and Pare was amazed about how Shem Havaya came into the picture and was able to solve everyone's problem. But when it came to Makas B'Choirois, you had to have at the same time that the Goyim were being punished, not a little punishment, but it went all the way to the end. It says Nigmar Adin, because the B'Choirois died. And at the same time, the Yidden were saved. So, in general, the first half of the night is made up of Gevura. The second half of the night, from Chatzos and onward, is made up of Chesed. If the Makkah were to happen prior to midnight, everybody would have been punished. Goyim and Yidden. Because of how Midas Hadin had a tiny to the Eibishter, that they both served Avodah Zarah. This is before Matan Torah, so Yidden didn't have the schus of Torah to protect them. And if the Makkah were to take place after Chatzos, or during the day, you would have Midas HaChesed, and that would be in control, and it would make that both the Yidden and the Goyim would have Chesed. What comes out is, the normal state of things is, if whatever Midah of the Eibishter is shining at that moment, that's what happens across the board. The only place where you find where things can be broken up, where you have a steer, Minei Ubei, you could have the Yidden being saved and the Goyim being punished, that only exists exactly at midnight. Now, what does midnight have? What kind of koyach does it have? So the truth is, it's because the Eibishter himself is coming to take care of that Makkah. By the other Makkahs, you had Shem Havaya, canceling out Shem Elikim, but to have Atzmas Alein to come down and cause the Makkah to happen, that had to take place by Makas B'Choirois because of this power of Nimnanim noise to do good and bad at the same time. Now, midnight acts as a co-joiner. It brings two things together. It brings together the first half of the night, which is Gevura, and it brings together the second half, which is Chesed. It brings them together. So within one moment, like the corner of a table that brings together two sides, midnight joins together those two things. Now, within that same moment of joining together, it also acts as a schalkus. It also separates. So it does a skalus, and that skalus causes that within that same moment there should be a schalkus, it should separate again. Now, this alone is very perplexing. How is it possible that within one moment you should have two things that are opposite by nature? If you're talking about joining two things together, you're talking about uniting, you're talking about tolerating both the Gevura and the Chesed together. If you're talking about separating, you're talking about not being able to tolerate two opposites. Yet at the same time, we have this iskalus and this ischalkus all taking place within the same second. Now, even in the second itself, you can divide up a second more and more ad infinitum, and the only one that knows the exact moment of division is the Eibishter himself. And that was the problem that Moshe had to tell Pare that it's going to be around the time of midnight, because the Eibishter knew exactly when he was going to do it. He knew exactly when midnight is going to be, but in case Pare should make a mistake. So we covered that too. Now, what exactly caused that the Eibishter should do such a thing, to save the Yidden and punish the Goyim at the same time? It's when the Eibusher saw the blood of the Karban Pesach and Dam Milah that was sitting at the doorway, that's when the Eibusher felt the need to bring about this miracle. Now, what exactly is the doorway and the implications of it? There's two mezuzahs, there's two posts to a doorway, and there's also the mashkef, the lentil on top, and they signify very high levels. So this is what we're talking before, that the Eibusher has, even inside of himself, chesed and gvura. That's the two sides of the doorway, the right and the left side. And the lentil on top refers to the Eibusher himself, the Baal HaRatzon. Now, normally in Seder Ishtalshalos, we talk about 3 tracks. There's 3 lines that travel throughout Seder Ishtalshalos: the right, the left, and the middle. Or in other words, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes. So, what you would normally have in Atzilus and in Biyah, you would have the right, left, and middle path. So why is it that a doorway only has 2 pathways, the right and left doorpost? And normally we say in Seder Ishtalshalos, there's a 3rd path, a middle path. So the truth is like this. In order for the Eibusher to create a world, he needed to create an intermediary in order to bring this about. And that's Keser. In simpler terms, when you refer to a person wanting to do something, he needs that want, the Ratzon. He needs a will to do something. So the Ratzon is actually the soul itself moving in a certain direction. That's Ratzon. Now, Ratzon in its purest form doesn't take on any kind of emotions or any kind of rationale that would give meaning to the Ratzon. So, we would say that it's just a want, and the want doesn't have a reason behind it. That's Pnimius Ratzon. That's the ultimate connector that the Eibusher put in place that could connect himself with the world in order to have Seder Ishtalshalos. Once you get to Chitzonius Ratzon, once you get to Arachampin over there, there's already a Tam Kamos, there's already a place for reasons to come into the picture, and they express themselves more fully when it comes down, light comes down into the world of Atzilus, into Chacham of Atzilus. But Ratzon in its purest form is in Atik. Now, in Atik itself, the most purest would be the Gimel Rishonim of Atik, the first 3. It's referred to as Reisha D'Leis Yada. So over there also, in Pnimius Atik, you still have a right and a left side of Chesed and Gevurah, the same way it exists by Atmas itself. Now, only when you start to give a reason for the Ratzon, when it comes from Arachampin into Atzilus, over there is where you start having a middle path, the path of Das, because what ends up happening is person has a choice whether they should go to the right or to the left, Chesed or Gevurah, and in order to make that decision, they use Das to influence to go right or to go left, which means to say they use logic, they use a reason in order to push themselves to go one way or the other. This concept of Das does not exist the same way in Pnimius HaKeser, because the Ratzon didn't come into a reason yet. It's just a pure Ratzon. Now, normally I would say that the doorway that we're referring to here is referring to Malchus of Atzilus, where all light shines forth from Atzilus into Biyah has to go through that doorway. The only reason why you have a doorway is in order to have access to go in and out of a house, and without a doorway, the house doesn't become a house. Now, why would you need an actual door frame? You could just punch a hole through the wall. So the door frame signifies that this is the spot that you will use for going in and going out of the house, and no other spot. Which means Malchus is the only doorway that all light comes through in order to go into our world, and any type of elevation that we do from our world into the world of Atzilus also goes through that doorway. Now, normally, you would have all 3 kavim going through this doorway. Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, the right, the left, and the middle would all come through this doorway. But that would exist if we're just talking about regular Seder Ishtalshalos, the regular way the light flows. But what took place by Makas B'Choirois was a special light that's higher than even Matan Torah, higher than all Shabbos and Yom Tovim, and even higher in a certain sense than Yom Kippur, which it itself is a Mein of Olam Haba. Because by Makas B'Choirois, the Eibusher himself came down to take care of that Makkah. And in that case, since we're talking about already a level which is higher than Chitzonius HaKeser, you're talking about a place which doesn't include Das, it doesn't include the middle Kav. We're talking here about Pnimius Atik, and even higher, but we know that in Pnimis Atik is the Eibishter himself. And when the Eibishter himself came down and he saw the doorway and he saw the blood on it, with that he triggered a Sarusa de Leila that's higher than where any Sarusa de Latata could ever reach. And the Eibishter caused that the Yidden should be saved and the Goyim should die in Makas B'Choirois. Now, what exactly do we refer to when we say Chesed and Gvura in the Eibishter? In Atzmus Alein. So he explains it that the example is given like the love of a father to a child, to B'nai Yechidai, and the love in reverse back from the B'nai Yechidai back to his father. That over there, in Pnimis HaRatzon, the father only wants this child and he loves him like he loves himself, and alongside that love comes a sinna towards anything that will go against that love that he has towards his son. Or another example is a person that loves life and hates death. It all comes combined within the same package. So at that point in Pnimis HaRatzon, we don't use terminology of the Eibishter choosing. There's no bechira over there. There's just a schalkos, there's a division, there's a havdalah between a goy and a yid, and it doesn't have to come into any reasoning or any seichel. Now the truth is that whenever we talk about a high level in Kesser like this, we normally say that light and dark are equal to the Eibishter, and it wouldn't even make a difference between a Yid and a Goy. So how is it possible that we're saying that the Eibishter is going with the Yidden? So he says, in truth, even this level, Pnimis HaKesser, where the Eibishter chooses Yidden, it comes from a higher level. It comes from a level which is the Baal HaRatzon himself. So what comes out is, if the Eibishter would ever make a goyrel between Goyim and Yid, then the Yid would always win. So we're not talking about on a lower level where there's a choosing that's going on without seichel. We're talking about a choosing that always lands on one side of the coin. So this Ratzon that has no seichel attached to it is always influenced by the Baal Ratzon, by the Eibishter. And that was Haman's mistake, where he felt that he can make a girl and the Yidden and the Goyim are the same, because what he didn't realize is when it comes to the Baal Ratzon, Yidden will always be chosen, and it doesn't make a difference. So when we refer to the door frame here, we're referring to inside Atzmos himself, where the Baal Ratzon, the Eibishter himself, is sitting on the lintel on the top of the door frame, and the two side posts is Chesed and Gevurah, the way they exist inside Atzmos. And when the Eibishter came and he saw that the Yidden went and put the blood on, it says, so it says it a double time, because doorposts refer to Chesed and Gevurah. And this Emunah Pshuta that the Yidden had, that they followed the Eibishter wanted by putting the blood on the doorpost, it caused that the Eibishter should bring about an unbelievable miracle of Makas B'Choirois, where you can have the impossible existing at the same time. Now, what exactly does blood symbolize? So when a baby is first conceived, as the months go on, it starts out as being mainly full of dam wa nefesh. So the core of what makes the person a person is blood. As a secondary, as an added element, the person gets the power to think and do other things, but that chokhmah that's added to that dam is considered already an extra. And in general, that's why Adam is called Adam, because the Aleph goes on Aleph HaChokhmah, which goes on brains that are added, and the dam refers to the person himself, the original core chayis of the person. So the Eibishter saw that the Yidden were just like a child that's born, that's covered in blood, that he saw that the Yidden were surrounded with blood, and it says he raised us up on top of his head. We're talking here to a point which is higher than Seichel, like we're referring to earlier, that Pnimius Atik level, where you don't even deal with Seichel at that point. And that's why it says, Ve'erech misbaiseses b'damayich, that the Eibishter saw, just like a little baby that's just born that's covered in blood, he saw the blood that we put on the doorpost. You have to remember at that point it was also Leidas B'nai Yisrael, we were given birth to as a nation at that same time. So the Eibishter saw that we were surrounded with the blood of the original Emunah Pshuta, that the Yidden went and followed after the Eibishter in the desert. It says, Lechtech acharai b'midbar b'eretz lo zarua, that just like a child will always follow after his father no matter what, and in reverse, the father will also follow after the child. The Yidden followed after the Eibishter in the desert, not knowing what will be in store for them. And this triggered that they should be able to have Matan Torah later by the blood and by the fact that they followed after the Eibishter and the pain they went through in Mitzrayim, the Nasav and Nishma. All that triggered that Torah should come down. And the truth is that we're talking already about Torah. That's the way the Eibishter's light comes into Chochmah Vatzilus. And over there is already where the Ratzin takes on reason and logic. But even that, even Matan Torah was all triggered by this original act of the Dam, because we're referring to a higher level of Ratzin. Referring to the Eibishter himself, where Das doesn't even come into the picture, where Seichel doesn't exist yet. And through this, it automatically triggered this lower level of Das that we got the Torah. Which, inside of Atzmus Alein, this concept of Das, the lower level of Das, also exists, but it's the way it comes out of the higher level of the Eibishter himself. So, we first did the concept of the blood on the doorpost, which signifies the Emunah Pshuta, which signifies Chesed and Gvura, the way they are in Pnimis Atik. And from there is Nishtalshel, a lower level, where it comes into Chachma Vatzilus, where you have Das, and that's where Matan Torah exists. We'll just finish off with a beautiful pasuk from Hosea, that the Eibishter says that he loved the Bnei Yisrael when they were a lad, and since the days of Egypt, I have been calling out to my son. And then it says, I sent a leader to Ephraim who took them upon his arms, and they did not know that I healed them. So we're talking about over here like a father that picks up the child, a newborn, and picks him up above his head. Al Zaroisov. On top of those levels of Giluyim that come into Atzilus, on top of those levels that come into Chitzonis HaKeser, he put us above, and with that, he was able to heal us. And that's why it says that he was Pasach, that the Eibishter jumped. He jumped over those higher levels in order to come down onto those doorposts, because over there is where you have the Baal HaRatzin himself. Atzmus Alein is sitting on those doorposts, and we say the Eibishter is the Segel HaElyon, where a segel is upside down, just like the door frame, where there's a top segel, which is the lentil, and the two side nekudas, which is the right and left doorpost. And the Yidden have a regular segel, where the nekuda, the Emunah Pshuta, is relating to the Eibishter's Emunah Pshuta in us. And with that, we were zoicha to get such a amazing miracle of Makas B'Choirois and Yetzias Mitzrayim.